Welcome to the Academic Woman Amplified podcast. I'm your host, Kathy Mazak, tenured full professor, mom of three, and firm believer that the culture of academia needs to change radically. Women are revolutionizing academia within institutions that were not built for us. If you're ready to reject the culture of overwork, kick guilt and overwhelm to the curb, and amplify your voice to make a real impact on your field without breaking down or burning out, you're in the right place. And it all starts with writing. Let's go. Do you ever feel like you just can't catch up? Or maybe you feel like you can never catch up. That is actually the baseline way that you're operating in academia. We truly are pulled in 1,000 directions. And the feeling that that produces in us is one of being on a treadmill that's set a couple clicks too fast, and that you just keep kind of slipping back, and you never are running at a pace that feels natural, that feels solid, that feels good to you. So today I want to talk about how you control the pace. This came from a post in the I Should Be Writing Facebook group by a member of our group who had suffered a terrible loss in her life, which resulted in her having to pretty much completely disengage from her academic work for a month. And what happened, she told us, is that when she went back to work, she realized from the combination of both a change in perspective that a big loss gives you, and the fact that she experienced walking away from the job for a month and then walking back into it and everything being okay, she was still surviving. That experience made her realize that she didn't have to live this catch up mentality all the time. I had a couple of similar experiences that I want to relate to you. The first one happened when my second child, my son, was about 10 months old. So I am a professor at the University of Puerto Rico in Mayagüez, and we are just very fortunate to have a pretty darn good maternity leave policy. So I was coming back the first semester after my maternity leave. I was coming back, going through all the feelings of adjusting to the new semester after having been off for really almost two whole semesters, almost a year. And I was feeling like, okay, I need to get back. I kind of need to prove myself again. I was starting a new grant that had just been funded. We were trying to get the grant off the ground. I was teaching 3 sections of first year English and just basically trying to get my footing again as an academic mom. And about 2 weeks, maybe only a week and a half, about maybe 2 or 3 classes into the semester, it was one evening. I had put my daughter to bed. She was about 3 at the time. And my son had a lot of mucus and kind of like what seemed like a bad cold. And I was rocking him in the dark in his room, trying to get him to go to sleep. And all of a sudden he sits up and he vomits and he turns gray and gets like floppy. And of course, I started to panic. His color was just this ashen gray color, and I started to freak out. So I managed to get my 3-year-old into sneakers. I remember her wearing princess pajamas and then me having her put her sneakers on with her princess pajamas and trying to get to the car. At that same moment, thankfully, my husband was arriving home from work. I remember actually not being able to get the garage door up, having to duck under it, kind of halfway lifted, carrying the floppy baby, getting the toddler in the car, and rushing to the hospital. Now, thankfully, we live really close to the hospital, and in the car, I called my pediatrician. Of course, he was on vacation, but he picked up and he said, yeah, right to the hospital. So we get to the hospital. My son continues to throw up in my arms. He's floppy. I feel like he needs somebody to see him immediately, and I can't get anybody's attention. It was a very desperate feeling. And what happened to him was in Spanish called a paro respiratorio, which is basically he stopped breathing. He didn't need to be resuscitated because by the time we got to the hospital, he was breathing again, but very, very shallow. And that night started off a 7 to 10 day stay in the hospital with my 10-month-old son. They wouldn't discharge him from the hospital until he was breathing at a certain level. He ended up having a double ear infection and bronchitis and just really needed his lungs to get better before they let him out of the hospital. But they insisted, and I mean, of course I would want to stay with him, but part of the rules of the hospital were that a parent or guardian has to stay with the child, and it has to be a female parent or guardian. So that meant that every night I was sleeping in a chair at the hospital for 7 nights or so. My husband would be able to come and kind of relieve me while I went home and took a shower, tried to take a nap, which I usually couldn't do in this short amount of time that I had. And then I would go back to the hospital. But it was really a very mentally and physically trying time for me. It was pre-smartphone. I guess it must have been about 2010, and I didn't have a smartphone. So there was no way that I was going to be doing work from the hospital. Plus, I was in the hospital with a 10-month-old. And as soon as he started to get any energy, he was super active and jumping all around with the IV cables in his arms, having to kind of hold him down while we gave him breathing therapies. It was a lot of work. There was no way, in other words, that I could be doing any academic work or any work at all while I was at the hospital. Thankfully, my wonderful father-in-law came down, picked up our 3-year-old and took her to my in-laws' house, which is about 3 hours away. Of course, that was a relief for me because I knew she was well taken care of, but also it was scary because she was far away from me for a long time and we couldn't tell her when we would see her again. Like we couldn't know when we would be able to take her brother out of the hospital and she could come home. And so that was also very stressful. Because I didn't have a smartphone or any internet access at that time, basically I called my department chair and I said, look, I'm out until further notice because there was no other way to be. So, of course, I felt bad about it because it was the first few weeks of class and the students didn't even know me. I feel like later in the semester, when a family emergency or something happened, I would already have had kind of the students on my side and it wouldn't be a big deal. But they didn't even know who I was. We had met 2 or 3 times and I had disappeared from their lives completely. This is all to say that was a traumatic experience for me and my family. And I don't really feel like I recovered from it that semester at all. Even after we were out of the hospital, of course, my son was fighting colds and ear infections and congestion, and he was never a good sleeper. So basically, I would sleep with him on a mattress on the floor, waking up at least twice a night. And he is also an early riser. He still is. And he would wake up every morning at 4 or 4:30 and he was ready to go for the day. We spent a lot of mornings from 4 to 6 watching the Toy Story movies or Cars. I remember back in those days because I couldn't do anything. Like I was a blob. To say that I didn't really recover from that week in the hospital, I mean, that is really true. So I trudged on, is what I would say. And I tried to do my work, but it was really, really difficult. I was so severely sleep deprived that I was having a hard time putting thoughts together. And the way that I can explain this the best is through an experience that I had going to a memorial service for a colleague's husband who had passed away of Lou Gehrig's disease. And that colleague who passed away was also a professor in our university. He was married to a professor in the English department. I had met him maybe one time, but I didn't know him at all. And even his wife, like I knew her and I worked with her. She was a colleague, but I wouldn't say that we were like super close friends or anything. And I remember going to his memorial service and sitting in the back and, his wife wasn't crying. Her best friend wasn't crying. And I'm sitting in the back, absolutely sobbing, just with gasps and tears streaming down my face. And it was that moment when I realized I am not okay. I should not. Yes, we have sympathy and empathy for other people in their loss, but I was having a complete kind of breakdown reaction. It was an overreaction. And it was an overreaction rooted in feeling complete exhaustion and feeling completely worn down. So I remember driving home and talking to my sister on the phone and being in the car in the driveway. And I think my husband was already home with the kids and I was getting home. Either way, the kids weren't in the car. And I said to my sister, I need to rest and I don't know how I'm going to get the rest that I need. I think I need to check myself into a hospital. That was the only thing I could think of that would kind of take away all my responsibilities and let me focus on rest. And my sister said, wait, don't you have sick days? And I said, yes, I have sick days, but I couldn't possibly take my sick days for this. And we are so fortunate to earn a day and a half of sick days every month. And so I had taken most of them to add on to my maternity leave because we get them in addition to our maternity leave. But I had enough for maybe 2.5 or 3 weeks of sick leave. And because my sister said that to me, I realized, oh, this is exactly what sick leave is for. And so right in the middle of the semester, I think it was mid-October, I took a 3-week break from work. So many of you are thinking, I couldn't possibly do that. And of course, as I just said, that's exactly what I was thinking too. But actually, you can possibly do that. And in fact, I was able to say to my department chair, I'm taking this leave. Here's my doctor's, note. And he had to figure out a way to cover my classes. And I thought the world was going to collapse, but it absolutely did not. And what I did for 3 weeks was drive my kids to daycare, come home and lie down, and pick my kids up from daycare when the day was over. And that stopped me from actually having a complete breakdown where I would have had to have been hospitalized. And it helped tremendously. It was still not completely enough, though. And my husband said, you're going to need to wean the boy and go to your mom's for Christmas break by yourself because you need to get better. And so that's what we did. I called my mom. She came to Puerto Rico for a week and helped me wean he was a little over a year, helped me wean him. And then we went together to New Jersey. And wow, I felt a lot of mom guilt about leaving them, especially at the Christmas season. I actually can't remember whether I spent Christmas Day away from them, but in Puerto Rico, we celebrate Three Kings Day on the 6th of January. That's like the big present opening, spend time with family day. So probably I did. I probably was away from them for Christmas, but was back for Three Kings Day, which is the real big holiday for us. It took a lot of, I will say, it took some bravery to pull out of academia the way that I did and to recognize that this is what was going on and that I needed to take some action and then to take some action. And one of the things it taught me was similar to what the poster in our I Should Be Writing group learned from having a loss and then coming back. And that was that I control the pace. If you feel, or if I feel like the pace is too fast and too much, I need to take actions to slow the pace. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what those actions are, because I know that not everyone has sick days that they can take in the middle of the semester. And, you have to think about what you are entitled to. But you also need to think that you work a job just like everybody else works a job. And just because you're a professor and you love your students and you're dedicated to teaching them, or you're on a grant project and you have deadlines or whatever, you still are a human and you have to take care of yourself. So do whatever you need to do. Talk to HR at your university if you are at the point where you need a doctor's note that says she needs to be off for 3 weeks in the middle of the semester. Figure it out, because it's better to figure it out than for you to actually have the breakdown, be hospitalized, and then you are not in control of how you manage your reentry and how you manage what happens. I'm going to tell you another story about when I had an epiphany about controlling the pace, and that was Hurricane Maria on September 20th, 2017. That is a date that changed everybody's life here in Puerto Rico, and a lot of people in the States who have people in Puerto Rico that they love, or that they love this place. And I'll tell you what happened to us and then how it affected our academic year, really. So we rode out the storm. We are fortunate to have a concrete house with a concrete roof. And so we never really felt like we were going to have the roof blow off like our neighbors did. We did have flooding, but we are on the top of a hill, so we didn't have flooding. Like, one of my friends was floating on an air mattress because her house was flooded with 5 or 6 feet of water. We didn't have that. All the rooms had about 1.5 inches of water in them, but it had leaked through the windows, and it was just a lot of mopping up the next day. That's what happened to our house. And it was very disturbing to walk out and look around and see what really, there had been lush green tropical landscape. There were just these sticks, upright sticks of trees with not a leaf. And our house was plastered with what looked like leaves had been put into a blender and plastered on the walls of our house. That's what it looked like. Little tiny cut up pieces of leaves just everywhere. We live on a farm. It's about 0.5 kilometer from a paved road. Our road is dirt, and there's a lot of forest between us and the road. You wouldn't think it while you're driving it, but after a hurricane, you will know it. So what happened to us was that we couldn't get out of our property and nobody could get in. So we thankfully live in an off-the-grid house. So we have our solar panels. We didn't lose any solar panels. Our solar system kept working. We have a rainwater collection system. So our rainwater system kept working, although part of the filtration, the UV light broke. So we had to boil our water and make sure we always had boiled water. But that was like a very small inconvenience compared to the literal months and months that people were without power and water. It was about 2 to 3 months without power for people in my neighborhood. And without water, it was weeks. People would have to drive into the middle of town, and they had like these hoses hooked up to the fire hydrants, and you would fill all your stuff with water and take it back home. People were showering in the wash up from the gutters and showering with a bucket of water or bathing with a bucket of water. And that was life for months after Maria. It took us about a week to get out. During that week, we couldn't contact anybody because all the cell phone towers were down. So we had no way to contact anybody. All we could do, like I would go out in my backyard and there's a friend whose house I can see, and I would send her mental messages and I would think about my friends and family, and I would just was thinking about my family and sending them mental telepathy messages that we were okay. Meanwhile, my sister was tweeting at anybody who she could find that was in the Mayaguez area to see if they could come check on us. But truthfully, if they even had found our road, they wouldn't have been able to get here anyway. My husband spent a week with a chainsaw cutting trees to get us out. And we had a small landslide. So the last part was also literally shoveling the landslide off of the road. Even after that time, we spent weeks driving under a fallen tree that could have fallen on us at any minute, but had fallen in this way that was like from a uphill to down. And so we could drive under it, but there was no way that like one person, basically my husband, could take down that tree. And eventually our neighbors came with a troop of people and regular saws, not even chainsaws, and managed to fell that tree. Anyway, we got out. Once we got out, we're like, oh my God, let's go back in because it is crazy out here. It was so, everything was destroyed. There were power lines on the floor. It was absolutely horrible. And so that was our Maria experience for the immediate, like the first week after. We went back to school about a month later. So basically university and all the schools and everything was out for probably 3 to 4 weeks. And by the 4th week, we were back. So by the end of October, we were back at school. We were back at school, but we were teaching classes to students who were going home to no power, no water, no home because they had lost their roofs. So they were living with relatives. There wasn't a lot of food in the grocery stores. People didn't have power, so they're eating canned tuna and crackers for most of their meals. And there was no library. Our library had so much leaking, it was closed for almost a year. And really, like, it was not a situation where you could just like, now the university's on, let's go. No. So to say that the pace slowed down, the pace really slowed down. Part of it was just knowing what we had to deal with. Like, we couldn't assign all of these things because really every night, each person had to spend so much time sourcing water, sourcing food, sourcing gas. And so there wasn't time to assign a bunch of stuff to students because they were literally, it would take hours to source all the things you needed just to live your daily life. So that first semester, we all slowed down. We also had to actually complete the semester. And so the semester rode right over Christmas. So we would normally have a 4-week break at the holidays. In Puerto Rico, Christmas is very important. We have 4 whole weeks off. Everybody sees family. It's a lovely time. But this year, we just plowed right over that. In 2017, 2018, we plowed right over Christmas. And what happened was we ended up finishing the semester, I think in February, having 10 days of a break for turning in grades and stuff. And then we were back to start the spring semester in the middle of February. And they did some things to the schedule so that we ended at the end of May or maybe even into June so that they could at least run a little summer session. So by the time I got to May, which would be the time that normally we would be done with the semester, I was, again, completely exhausted. But this time I could see, I could recognize the signs of that exhaustion. And I decided to take some definitive action to stop getting to the point where I had to take a break. And I'm going to tell you the things that I did to see if they are things that you would like to do. And then I'm going to dig in a little bit to an exercise about how you want academia to feel. So this is how I recognize that I was kind of in pre-burnout. I was feeling exhausted from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed. So I would normally have like a burst of energy in the morning. My tiger time is in the morning. I always say I can take over the world between 8 and 11. But this was like, there was no energy at any moment. I didn't have that burst of energy that I normally would. I felt mentally foggy. I couldn't remember the words for things immediately. And that felt like, oh, I could recognize that I really, really needed a deep level of rest. And I could feel I was on the verge of tears, even more than usual. So similarly to the experience I had after my son was ill, where I was sobbing at this friend's memorial service, I could feel I was always on the verge of tears. And so those were the things that raised the red flag for me. And here's like what I did to recover from pre-burnout and try to put the brakes on burnout. And this is also, these things I'm telling you are also ways to help control the pace. So I was deliberately resting. I decided not to do anything extra, like anything that was not absolutely necessary to get done, didn't get done. And I tried to nap whenever the toddler was napping. At that time by that time we had 3, so we had a toddler. And I needed to really, really rest anytime that the kids were not at home and I was. I went to bed when the kids went to bed. So I was going to bed at 8:30 every night. I joined a gym that had childcare so that I could move my body without worrying about what the kids were doing. So I could take them, leave the kids, walk on the treadmill, or take a class. I wasn't trying to do anything aggressive. I wasn't lifting weights. I was trying to be really gentle, but the idea was movement and time spent on myself. I called in the reinforcements, and that was mom. I called my mom and I was like, "Can you come?" And she came. And I also looked into my summer and planned it in a way that it would be a recovery from the year, not a time to quote unquote get ahead. So that means that I sent kids to camp, which I normally do anyway, but that instead of sending kids to camp so I could get ahead, I was sending kids to camp so that I could recover. So that I worked on some writing 2 to 3 days a week, and then I just did things for myself the other 2 days. And that was really helpful and prevented me from getting to that point where I was at before. So I want to circle back to this idea that came up in the Facebook group of realizing that you control the pace or being willing to control the pace after you've had an experience that kind of jars you or takes you out of the kind of too fast pace of academia and then replants you there in a way that is different, with a different set of priorities perhaps, but also with just a different sense of pace. So I know a lot of people who responded to that post in the group were like, yes, this is how I feel. Like, I feel like everything is too fast, like I can never catch up, and that I have to catch up, but I can't. So what I want to say to you is that there are things that you can do to control the pace. And here's the first step. The first step is that I want you to think about right now. I want you to think, how do you want your academic life to feel? And I want you to come up with an adjective that describes how you want your academic life to feel. So for example, for those of you who are feeling like you can't catch up, or it's just all too much, and that you're working like all the time, at home, at school, all the time, maybe you want academia or your academic life to feel calm. Maybe you want it to feel focused. If you are entering a year where you want to apply for lots of grants and do lots of things and get promoted, maybe you want your academic life to feel powerful or inspiring or whatever. Come up with the word that is right for you. All right. I want you to write that word down at the top of a piece of paper. So I'm going to use the example of calm, that I want my academic life to feel calm. Write it on the top of a piece of paper, list from 1 to 10, and you're going to write 10 things that a calm person does. And I'm going to give you examples. The more specific they are, the better this exercise will work for you. So, for example, a calm person eats breakfast sitting at the table instead of running around or in the car, right? A calm person takes a walk every day. A calm person is content with doing 3 things on her to-do list that she identified the night before, and that's enough. A calm person makes plans and sticks to them. A calm person starts working at 9 a.m. and stops working at 5. A calm person gets 7 to 8 hours of sleep, asks for help before a situation gets out of control. A calm person shakes off guilt about undone projects, concentrates on restorative activities on the weekends, and meditates using the Calm app in the middle of the workday. So those are 10 things that a calm person does. Notice how specific they are. That's what I want you to do for your word. And after you've done that, you can pause. If you're not driving, or walking, you can pause, do that, and then come back and listen to the rest of this. The problem is that you're having right now is that you're saying, after I turn in this revise and resubmit, then I'll feel calm. Or after I finish up the data collection on this grant project, then I'll feel calm. But actually, you need to start feeling calm right now. The feeling comes first. You need to work towards feeling that you identify that you want, and not putting some parameters around when you're allowed to feel that or some future time when you're allowed to feel that. No, the feeling comes first. So your challenge is you've identified the feeling, you've listed 10 things that a person who has that feeling does. Now your job is to slowly start to do those 10 things so that you can start to cultivate that feeling in your life. You need to draw a line in the sand and say, from now on, I am a calm person. From now on, I feel calm about my academic life. And take these steps to actually feel that way. The feeling comes first. That's my challenge to you, is to identify how you want academia to feel, and then take those action steps to actually make it feel that way. That's how you control the pace. I know that it feels like there's so many demands on you that you don't control, but what you do control is how you react to those demands. You control how you process those demands made on you. You control and monitor and work towards being better. Your feelings around those events and things that happen to you. So I hope that this podcast has helped you recognize burnout, have the confidence to ask for help when you need it, have the confidence to remove yourself from academia. It will still be there when you get back. It will be okay. You can slow down. And you can make academia feel the way you want it to feel. And let me just stress that when academia feels the way you want it to feel, you are a better academic, doing better work, and making a bigger contribution to the production of knowledge and the teaching of your students than you can when you feel like you have to catch up all the time. If you're interested in changing the way that you approach academic life, in changing the way that academia feels to you, and you are on the tenure track, but pre-tenure, I invite you to apply for my Amplify Faculty Writing Accelerator program. Now, Amplify is a program that has this name, Faculty Writing Accelerator, because that's what everybody wants, right? To write more and to learn how to do it faster and all of those things. But what we really give you in that program is permission to do it the way that you want to do it and the tools to control the pace. We want you to be productive. We want you to get tenure, but we want you to do it on your terms. What we're trying to do in this program is actually battle the culture of overwork and burn down the patriarchy so that we make room for the way that women do things and who women are inside of academia. Again, if you're interested in applying, it's an application-only process. Cohorts are forming on a rolling admissions basis, so you can apply anytime. You just go to http://bit.ly/pre-tenure, all one word. So that's bit.ly, bit.ly/pre-tenure. That will take you to a short application where you can fill out some information about yourself and where you are in your pre-tenure journey. And after you fill out that short application, which is only about 8 questions long, you'll be prompted to schedule what we call a Tenure 10 call, which is a 10-minute call with one of our writing coaches that helps to pre-qualify you and make sure that the program is a good fit. If everybody thinks the program's a good fit, then we will schedule you for a tenure strategy session with me where I'll give you all the program details and we can enroll you in the program. Again, go to bit.ly/pre-tenure. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time loving on yourself and your writing by listening to this episode. If you'd like to continue the conversation, join the over 7,000 academic women in the I Should Be Writing Facebook group. Just go to facebook.com/groups/I Should Be Writing or search for I Should Be Writing inside your Facebook app. See you inside.